episode number 5 of In Pursuit of Clarity, entitled To the Subverters of Western Nations. I thought we'd do something different this time, and I'd read a piece I found online, one which I neither avow nor disavow, of course, and offer only for your consideration. It comes to us from a fellow named Al, which I presume is short for Albert, from Asheville, Louisiana. And it reads as follows. I wanted to direct a message to those subversive elements that have largely hijacked our governments and economies over the past few decades, and by doing so speak to both sides of the ideological fence of a struggle that seems to be nearing a flashpoint. As I write this, thousands are in the streets in Paris, and millions around the world are watching. And I assure you, this is only an opening salvo, a prelude. The energy being given expression here is very similar to that which you'll be seeing over the coming months and years, and represents a furious, desperate reaction to your out-of-control, parasitic corruption. You've been given chance after chance after chance to act more justly, to alter your path, if only enough to allow for some steam release valve to be triggered to calm the situation. You've instead chosen, in line with your insatiable mindset, to double down and become even more deceptive and scheming than ever. The world is waking, and waking at a pace you probably didn't expect. Your bought and paid for press has been outed as a propaganda tool, so corrupt it no longer deserves the label news media. Your efforts to control thought and speech online, and your efforts to use artificial and contrived internet chatter to manipulate, are being outed and exposed, left and right. You may still control the minds of tens of millions of the least aware and most naive, of those who least care to deeply understand their world. But for the first time, these NPC drones are opposed by nearly equal numbers of those able to see beyond the veil, and their energy is far more potent. As you lead the former group further and further away from the latter, you make a resulting explosion inevitable. And you should know that this explosion won't be the fault of those who react to your criminal behavior. The responsibility lies solely with those who are forcing their hand. Your goal of turning our world into a borderless shopping mall in which a small clique without moral compass or ethical constraints completely dominates the mass of humanity and sets the tone of their economies, cultures, political systems, and social structures is failing and will fail. There still exist men that refuse to cede their nations to jackals that care nothing for national interest or those of the citizens within them. Individuals that refuse to allow a world to be created in which their children will have to work twice as hard for half as much, where they'll be treated as second-class citizens on the streets of the nations their fathers built, where they'll be forced to welcome their replacement by foreign cultures with foreign values, and to do so with a smile, else risk career suicide or even criminal penalties. Your demand that we not only tolerate, but welcome higher crime rates, vastly decreased social cohesion and community bonds, increased societal chaos and tension, the death of our middle classes, and the establishment of an all-powerful technocracy, spearheaded by individuals that seem to despise us, is being rejected across the world. You've turned Paris, once the crowning cultural jewel of Europe, into something unrecognizable. San Francisco, once a quaint aesthetic paradise, is now covered in human feces, urine, needles, and despondent homeless, with much of the rest of California standing poised to soon follow. London has become the laughingstock of the world, a heavily surveilled nanny state which seems to be tripping over itself to embrace any and all anti-Western sentiment and ideals, and self-immolating in the process. You've made the once picturesque streets of Germany and Sweden too dangerous for young girls to walk at night, and fought aggressively to cover up the crimes against them in cases in which the offending party isn't of the racial group or culture you're seeking to smear. Within a few short decades, you've brought nations representing the peak of human civilization to their knees, to the brink of chaos and the rule of the jungle. And all of this is part of your personal quest for power and control and filthy lucre. The world is waking, and the world is very angry. We're aware you have money, all the money in the world, and you continue to do everything in your collective power to further rig the system to assure that that which you don't have, you soon will. But in case you haven't recognized, your money is beginning to lose much of its power with regards to its ability to genuinely move hearts and minds, to manifest social and cultural change. And your attempts to fund mass migrations are being increasingly exposed and opposed. Decades of an easy path to the top caused some of the worst men our species has ever produced to believe themselves to be gods, mistaking the success of their brazen and shameless dishonesty within formerly high-trust societies for merit or ability, carried away by their own faulty self-perceptions and absurdly inflated egos. It's only a matter of time before your involvement in human trafficking, drug running, organ harvesting, and your constant scheming to spark open conflict in the Middle East and Russia is fully exposed for all the world to see. We've not forgotten the 2 world wars you and yours so aggressively helped instigate and so wildly profited from, while 100 million plus lives around the world were snuffed out to help further improve your bottom line. I'm curious, how many of your relatives' sons and daughters fought in these wars? How much of this death and destruction you caused to this planet touched you personally? The sick joke is that everyone on both sides of the fence knows the answer to this question even before you provide it. The world has had enough of the well-rehearsed and teleprompter-induced drivel of individuals like Obama and Macron and Merkel and Juncker, of that smug and self-righteous tone of those like Hillary or Comey or Strzok, as they escape justice for the highest of high crimes, the open coup attempt against a democratically elected president for daring to engage in a course correction in favor of the people of the United States, as opposed to the standard fare of service to a handful of banking families and their vassals and octopus-like tendrils stretched across the world. We've had enough of our televisions and movie theaters being turned into indoctrination centers, as opposed to means of entertainment or information. We've had enough of your attempting to stamp out every last vestige of freedom of thought and speech on the internet, and your use of tech and big data to brainwash and program the public, with a proficiency never dreamed of by any corrupt leader of past ages. Our food supply has become almost hopelessly genetically modified and pesticide-laden. Our water supply is teeming with fluoride and God knows what else. Our vaccinations are deeply suspect. Our air and water are increasingly polluted with each passing year, while the absurd proposed solutions do nothing but further line the pockets of you and your cabal. Radio waves and electronic emissions now fill the air with little to no data on their effects on the human brain or body, and seemingly no desire to understand them. And in fact, one might argue there's an active campaign to assure we don't come to understand their effects. Your chosen technological and cultural path has removed us from the soil and placed us into depressing and unnatural concrete jungles, while you break the backs of our farmers worldwide and replace them with corporate conglomerates under your control, forcing the use of your Monsanto seed and chemicals while you charge exorbitant fees to do so. Our entertainment industry is now devoted to spreading your message and worldview, with your gatekeepers standing at the door as publicists, promoters, agents, and producers, letting only those willing to dance to your tune pass through. Hollywood, that sickly creation of yours, has become the most culturally degenerative influence in the world, and seems to have doubled as a paradise for sexual predators and pedophiles, none of whom have been brought to justice, despite hundreds of correlating first and second-hand accounts from those involved. You've destroyed our innocence and high-trust societies and replaced them with degeneracy, despondency, and despair. The resonance one formerly felt for his neighbor or fellow citizen has been replaced with mutual distrust and misunderstanding. Because any nation that seeks to represent everything and everyone simultaneously ultimately represents nothing, something a child of a few decades ago could have told you, before your hijacking of academia stopped teaching students and kickstarted a process of politically correct mental conditioning, turning a significant percentage of an entire generation into sheltered and oversensitive, lost and confused souls, trapped beneath layer upon layer of muddled and contradictory doctrine.
Ain't
You
that the
orchestrated
truth?
the destruction of all European monarchies, and after a willful campaign of deception akin to promising the children of a family unlimited sugar and toys, and convincing the mother she was being mistreated and oppressed, you goaded them into killing off the father, and now the entire household is in ruins. The world has become unhinged, unmoored, depressed and despondent. And as always, after causing the problem, your cabal was first on the scene with a ready-made solution, using big pharma to slowly turn the Western world into walking zombies, divorced from nature, spirit, primal energy, and God. While families like the Sacklers became billionaires by helping usher in an unprecedented opiate epidemic, our already devastated middle class entered into a deadly tailspin as they sought some respite from the pain created by a fever dream world of your creation. And I see no evidence that any of you care, not one whit. You're here to take all you can, whenever and wherever you can, at any cost. You are not leaders, you are not capable men. You are snakes, manipulators, deceivers, and parasites, and your goal is to suck people and nations dry and move on to the next. And now you seek to unite us all into a one-world umbrella government to do these things with even greater efficiency. I won't mince words. I've come to despise you to your rotten cores. I've tried for several years to find redeeming traits and characteristics, to avoid feeling a burning hatred, only to discover the culture of your cabal is more base and worm-like than I ever could have imagined. But at the same time, I say these words as a genuine effort to avoid the coming transition being messier than it needs to be. With a sword in one hand, an olive branch still exists in the other, and the choice is yours as to which you receive. The energy in this reactionary wave won't be diffused by any of your usual tricks or tactics, and your money will only help cause immense bloodshed and suffering, as the inevitable is further delayed. The defining trait of the culture you so used and abused over the past decades is a noble and innately magnanimous nature. To those in your ranks willing to stand down and cease the subversion and deceit, cease your support to this most satanic and destructive of machines, you may even escape earthly justice. To those who continue to play this game, as someone with his finger on the pulse of the nation and the world, I can promise you your game will not end well for you. You've sinned against nature, and nature is now gearing up to redress this balance. How this happens is up to you. Just know beyond any shadow of a doubt, it will happen, and it looks like it may happen sooner rather than later. The ball is in your court. You'd be wise not to ignore it. So that's the piece that I wanted to read, authored by Albert. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.
And what he meant by nature. We're all nature. We're natural. Everything we make is unnatural. Everything man-made is unnatural. And it isn't just like Mother Nature. It is nature. And it is going to have blowback consequences to this Kabbalah that's pushing this insane insanity. Yes. Yes. And as he said, it will fight back one way or another.